we're going to be really talking about the experiences that both our CIO friends, but also from an HP perspective, what they're seeing happening in their customers, and what are the kinds of engagements they're involved in. So if I may just start with a round of sort of crisp opening remarks from the panelists, starting with you, Vijay. Please do share. We know you're doing a lot of stuff at MotoCorp. What's the journey looking like, and especially from a security perspective, where's the conversation? Over to you, sir.
Thanks, Jaideep. And as you rightly said, digital is not a destination but a journey. So we started our journey long back, and in fact, it's not just MotoCorp but the entire automotive industry, if I can first take that. Entire automotive industry has been kind of at the forefront of digital for years and years. If I look from within MotoCorp, all the technologies we have been using, but let me give one or two examples rather than giving a theoretical thing. Say, we around 7 years back decided that all our dealerships all over the country need to be connected via cloud so that the customers all over get the same experience, whether you are in Guwahati or you are in Kashmir, you get exactly the same experience, and then it was coupled with various things on, be it on analytics, be it on mobility, various other stuff. And also around 2.5 years back, we actually created something called a digital showroom. Perhaps no one in India had thought of that, and we created a digital showroom at that, which we displayed at Auto Expo in 2014 also. So digital has been going on, and very recently we did something called a digital twin. So we went ahead with our factory at Halol, so where we actually created a full digital factory and the entire line. And then we created the physical factory. So you simulate the entire thing, create first a virtual environment, and then do all the changes, all the modifications on the virtual thing. Simulate what needs to be done, what needs to be improved, and things like that. And then that reduces your cost of doing things, that reduces the time to rework, and improves efficiency a lot.
Shouvik, if I may come to you, I think in the financial services space broadly, and I think more specifically in insurance, if I remember right, sure. What's the journey been like for you, and the different attitudes as compared to, say, automotive?
So my job has been to do the IT transformation and then move on to digital transformation of global companies. When we used to work in a bank, we looked at what the future was going to look like, and we found that we had no clue about how the digital world would evolve. From our perspective, we decided to forecast and look over the horizon, which I think we were one of the few people to do that, and saw competition that was completely different. So, for example, as your money becomes less paper and more bits and bytes, you would find that managing data becomes very important. And then your competition becomes companies like Google, who manage data in a really big way. Now, that was the thinking about 10, 12 years ago. And I was actually delighted because I could actually know what my money was doing if Google was going to manage my money. More recently, we integrate digital products and services into our business processes. And we try to do two things. Number one, how do we help our clients to become better at what they do and therefore start creating the market for our products and services? And the second thing is, how do we build organization culture and deepen the knowledge and deepen the technology and deepen the awareness so that people can contribute? One example of that is we provide our business performance pretty much real time on a daily basis. So people can react and people can see how their contribution actually helps the organization. So that's been the journey.
Veneeth, if I may come to you next, and then I'll take your perspective, Michael. Again, healthcare, all of us, well, I should say, unfortunately, at some point, will become customers of the healthcare industry. But, sensitivity of data that you folks have on your systems is probably more critical than in any other industry, and people, quite rightly, will get very emotional if bad things start to happen. So what are the attitudes, within Fortis and indeed within the wider sort of healthcare provider sector? Love to get your perspectives on that. Yeah.
At Fortis Healthcare, I would say we started a journey around November 2015. And taking a leaf from what Vijay said, it's a long journey, as I see it. It's a journey that's worth its time, but it's a long journey. We started off by moving to the cloud. We got our backend systems up on the cloud, and we we went on to the entire office started using products of the cloud. So that was the first step in the journey. Sometime in Jan-Feb, we took one more step forward, and we have now a customer mobile app that we have for people who can take an appointment anytime for any of our hospitals, look for doctors, their time, their consultations, and so on. So these are all the steps that we've taken, baby steps that we've taken in our journey so far. For me, the couple of things that holds a lot of significance is it's very important that all of us realize that when the moment you talk about digitization, what comes to mind for normal or a layman or a business folks, many of our business colleagues, is how quickly can we have a web-enabled product, how quickly can we have a mobile app, how do we get IoT enabled in many of our solutions. But when you do that, it's important to manage the expectation, to tell them that it's also important to have your underlying processes automated and digitized before you jump onto this bandwagon of going mobile. The real transformation and the real interesting piece would be when you start having a patient records digitized. Many of us have not been able to do it so far. We've done it in bits and pieces, not in a way it is being done in the western part of the world. We still have our patient records and papers. There is no unified ID in many of our hospitals. We're still struggling on all that piece. So that's one way. That would be one of the culmination of the journey, I guess.
So Michael, you've heard about digital twins getting created before the factory gets created, regulatory issues, healthcare related issues, so wide variety of perspectives here, right? And within all this, I can also add, I suppose, that the security conversation has really moved to the forefront. I think Vijay spoke about it becoming part of the intrinsic strategy and architecture as well, which I'm sure is the case across the board. So I'd love to hear your perspective in terms of the experiences you've had as a global leader within HP, working with customers around the world.
Yep, absolutely. I think what we've seen over the last few years is a real change in customers coming to us and wanting us to bring innovation to what they're doing, both from products, but also from services. Really being able to bring in thought leadership and share best practices on what we're seeing across the globe, and work with them, their teams, to develop strong security practices and services around what they're doing. So it's definitely been a growth for us. It's been probably easier to do the innovation around your products and make sure that you're building security in up front. But what we're seeing with the services is it's becoming a high demand of coming in, giving that guidance, and helping it at the level that we can.
Okay. And Simon, if I may come to you, in your opening remarks, you spoke about the lack of awareness that people had with respect specifically to printer security. But at a broader level, as we go through the digital journey, I think there was IoT spoken about as an example. The new types of technologies being implemented also open up new vulnerabilities, right? So what is the journey, and if I may, across the region, when it comes to security maturity that you're seeing in different countries? And what would your thoughts be, to the panel and to the audience in terms of some of the key things they should be thinking about in the near term?
Sure. So late last year, IDC undertook a maturity-scape benchmark around IT security maturity. This is a maturity-scape that's developed as global best practice around IT security on a scale of 1 to 5. We did a study of over 800 organizations across the region. And the results were kind of interesting because it didn't really matter which country you were in, whether you're in India, Australia, Singapore, and China. It didn't really matter which vertical you were in, whether you're in financial services, healthcare, government, even the telcos. Between 70 and 80% of all organizations were at stages 1 and 2 on a 5-stage scale. The really interesting thing was it wasn't for a lack of technology, but it was mostly an attitude, a business attitude. And there were kind of 3 key takeaways. Number 1 was risk management processes across the organization were poorly understood. There were no robust risk management processes that encompassed everything the business did other than financial investment. So IT investments were not part of that structured risk management. It was an IT risk conversation, not a business risk conversation. The second thing is we were still using kind of second platform approaches to IT security. The bad guy is on the outside, everything on the inside is safe. And we know that that's just not true. As I mentioned previously, the old days prior to the internet, yes, you could close everything off and it was very simple, but now the connections are so many, you can't plug all those holes. And then the third thing was the skills. The skill sets required to run IT security have changed over the years. From the days of implementing a firewall and VPN, we've gone. Now it's about constant situational analysis of our environment, which requires deep analytical skills, which very few security practitioners have. The leading edge organizations are outsourcing a lot of these processes, whereas the early adopters, shall we say, are still trying to run everything themselves. And that's just simply not possible in this day and age.
Okay, and let me just pick up from there and I guess open it up to the wider panel again. The fact is, I think all of you mentioned we're in the middle of a journey and security is more and more important. So if I may look out, let's say, next 3 years to the turn of the decade, I think it's safe to say that whether it's the motorcycle business or the healthcare industry or indeed the insurance business, it's going to look dramatically different. And the key driver of this difference indeed is going to be technology, right? So when you folks are considering what the next 3 years look like in terms of the journey, I'd like to get maybe the spotlight on 2 parts of it. So one, how are you balancing the whole notion of business investments exceeding, or rather, business returns exceeding business investments, right? In other words, the ROI should be decidedly positive to sustain the whole effort. And second, as you go through, and indeed some of the technologies we may not even be considering today, but will be considering in the future, how are you approaching that from a security perspective? And Vijay, if I may come back to you again, and then we'll go through the panel.
So there are 2 parts to what I heard. So one is how do we approach this path? The reality is in today's time, you can't really make a strategy which is for 3 years, 5 years or longer. Since the technology, customer needs, everything is evolving so fast, all the organizations, be it within IT or business, they have to be so nimble and ready to change their stance. So it actually is not that after 3 years, I'll do this. So the first thing is, why am I doing it? Am I doing it for customer experience? Am I doing it for something else? I'm just trying to explore a new technology. And if it works, once we start investing more, then maybe business value is there. But for the first pass, try it fast. If you fail fast, learn from it, move on. And don't get bogged down by business value.
Thanks, Vijay, for bringing up the point around data. We are the custodians of our customers' data, and we have to be very careful in terms of how do we manage it and how do we secure it and things like that. It is fundamental. So leaving that aside, we discussed the point around the ROI. The operating models are changing. The internal operating models about how you have roadmap development, and then you have some investment buckets and some things in between. So they will continue to change as you have to respond to customers who are not waiting for the roadmap to come through. The last bit is around the security pieces. And we have, in terms of our insurance core products, what happens is you sit at the center of an ecosystem of multiple products, multiple vendors, multiple user types, and multiple devices. So bringing it architecturally together is a really complex situation, because we cannot ensure, we may have policies in place, but we cannot ensure that those policies are being adhered to by the ecosystem. And therefore, we have to be constantly on board that, okay, so what are the intrusion points that affect our customers' data? Because that is sacrosanct. As you go more digital, the fundamental bits around data and the security and the architectural standpoints become a challenge, but there are ways to manage those challenges. And we'll talk about it maybe a little bit later, but vendors do have a responsibility to adhere with the overall ecosystem and the principles of security for the overall ecosystem.
Veneeth, from a Fortis perspective, you mentioned, I think in your narrative, that you've rolled out the patient app, as it were, and they can now do appointment scheduling and so on. What's the security flavor within that?
Yeah, so in the healthcare, again, the future looks, most of us are talking the same thing now, it's more the care that becomes prominent than the health, which means the pre-hospital care or ensuring that you don't get to the hospital. So keeping you fit, managing your health is one bit, and the post-hospital both plays a big role now as you go ahead. We don't want, definitely nobody wants you to stay in the hospital for long. First of all, let's work together so that you don't get to the hospital. And if you've been to the hospital, let me take you off the hospital and take you home and still monitor you when you're at home and get you well soon. We had attempted the telemedicine piece. We're trying to reach out, not been very successful there, but that's, again, there's a lot that can be done in that space. So there's a lot around remote monitoring, making the hospital come to you onto your palm in a way, than you having to work on this. So like Vijay again mentioned, in this case, it's not a business case where a business ROI is being discussed. Here's purely more so as to how much is there a business buy-in? Is the business interested in taking it to market and using it, rather than pushing it down their throat, saying there's a lot of profitability or benefit in it. So that's what we will get. Coming back to the last point of, as we go through this journey, as I initially mentioned, more and more data would get into this digital space. For which what we are set forward doing is, I'm of the school where I believe being on the cloud is safer than being on premise. So it's that. So we try to build a spine, as we call it, and all of our patient data, as we grow, would go into this single spine, is on the cloud. And any authentication, anything happens on that piece. That helps me manage it at one single place, have some control over who gets access to it and who does not, what goes into it, what comes out of it. I guess that is a small step that we've taken in that journey to ensure our data is safe.
That's very interesting. So I'm guessing for all of you, there's a little bit of an innovation fund which you're allowed to dip into for the fast failure kind of projects, which I guess is a great learning for the wider audience as well. Michael, what is it that your customers can expect from HP when you look out the next 2 to 3 years? Their journeys are evolving. What is HP's journey looking like?
Well, again, as I said, we have a lot of investments around security today, but the most important part is that we listen to our customers. So events like this is where we're listening to how are they using our technology, how is it being implemented within their environments, so that we can change and make sure that our innovation coming out is meeting what the true customer requirements are. So I think whenever you look 3 years out, we have a vision of where we think security is going to continue to be important, but how that gets applied and exactly what we create around it is still going to be developed by our customers talking to us and telling us what the needs are.
And finally, back to you, Simon. So varied perspectives, the innovation funds, fast failure, new types of threats coming through. What is it that you're telling sort of your clients in terms of, as they look through the lens of the next 2 to 3 years to the turn of the decade? Sure. From a security architecture perspective, a policies perspective, what should be the new things they should be thinking about?
Sure. Well, I think for a number of years, IDC has been saying that the nature of technology ownership is kind of changing. And I think we've heard 3 great examples here that organizations should really be only investing in core technology that delivers critical business differentiation. There's a whole bunch of technologies that everybody else has that you don't necessarily need to own, you can subscribe to as a service. And it's really interesting because there's an awful lot in the security space that falls into that category as well. And a lot of organizations will just, no, it's security, I need to own it. But where are you going to find those skills from? And so I think as a part of the architecture moving forward, you need to think is, what is that digital transformation strategy that is driving the organization? What are the key applications that are going to change the business that you're part of? Not the ERP systems, not the financial backroom systems, but the kind of applications we've heard of today. And what do you need to own and control to manage that environment, bearing in mind the nature of data privacy is changing very rapidly across the world. The nature of threats is just increasing at such a phenomenal rate. So what is it you actually need to own versus what should you be outsourcing to the vendor community? Because trust me, the vendor community have lots of resources to do this. And I don't see us in Asia Pacific taking full advantage of that.
I'm going to just bring the discussion to a close, but before we do let you go, if I may offer a small token of appreciation for the time that you've taken out for us, gentlemen. Really appreciate you being here. Vijay, thank you for coming, sir.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure to have you with us. Big round of applause for the panel, please, folks. Thank you very much. Thanks for taking time out for us. I know it's a busy time for you as well. Michael, pleasure to have you with us. You've come all the way from Colorado. Longest journey here. Thank you very much, and thanks for your contribution there.
Thank you.
Thank you. Veneeth, thank you very much. Pleasure to have you with us as well. And Simon, I've got something for you as well. Thanks for joining us. I know it's been a long journey for you as well, but it's been wonderful to have you with us. Thank you very much. Big round of applause for the panelists, please, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you.